Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The war in Ukraine is set to escalate and shift. The US may lift some major restrictions and allow Kyiv to use American missiles to strike deep into Russia. In the past, Putin has called this a red line. So how will he respond to this move? And why has the US agreed to this now? We'll discuss all of that. Meanwhile, Moscow is flexing its naval muscle with a joint drill with the Chinese. In Bangladesh, a hush order for the Hindus on Durga Puja celebrations. What does it say about Dhaka's pledge to protect its minorities? In the US, while Khalistani separatists are endorsing India's opposition leader Rahul Gandhi. In Switzerland, a model is murdered by her husband and her body parts are pureed in a blender. In India, the government expands the universal health cover to benefit senior citizens. In Europe, iconic car brands are stalling. We'll tell you why. In Afghanistan, the Taliban begins work on a long-delayed gas pipeline. What is the Tapi project and whom does it benefit? How Commonwealth nations are making a new move to seek reparations from Britain, and all about the Polaris mission, the world's first ever private spacewalk. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Russian President Vladimir Putin invites Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for talks. Putin met India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval in Moscow. The Russian president told Doval he is waiting to meet his quote-unquote good friend, Prime Minister Modi. The meeting could take place on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in October. India and China discussed the resumption of direct passenger flights. This would end a 4-year suspension, which was triggered by the COVID pandemic and ongoing geopolitical tensions. Before 2020, there were more than 500 direct flights monthly between India and China. Staying with India, West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, will she resign? Mamata Banerjee says that she is, and I'm quoting, she is ready to step down in the interest of the people. The offer comes amid her government standoff with doctors who are on strike over the rape and murder of a doctor at the RG Kar hospital. The protesting doctors have refused to meet the Bengal Chief Minister. Israel strikes Syrian-controlled Golan Heights, killing at least 2 Hezbollah operatives. Just days ago, in fact, Israeli forces reportedly raided an Iranian weapons facility in Syria. In 1967, Israel seized much of the Golan Heights from Syria. The United Nations Security Council extends sanctions on the Sudan until September 2025. This includes an arms embargo, freezing of assets and travel bans. In 2023, fighting broke out between rival armed factions in the Sudan. The conflict has killed thousands and displaced millions. And Spanish Prime Minister meets Venezuelan opposition figure Edmundo Gonzalez. Last Sunday, Gonzalez fled to Madrid seeking political asylum. He had been in hiding since the July presidential election in Venezuela. President Maduro of Venezuela was declared the winner amid widespread claims of poll rigging. A bigger escalation in the Ukraine war is on the cards, not from Russia's end this time, but from Ukraine. Kyiv seems to be finally getting its wish. It has the weapons to strike deep inside Russia, but Ukraine was being held back by the West, specifically the United States. The US did not allow Kyiv to use long-range weapons to attack Russia. That seems to be changing now. The US is finally coming around. Yesterday, Antony Blinken was in Kyiv, that's the US Secretary of State, and he wasn't traveling alone. With him was British Foreign Secretary David Lammy. They met Ukraine's President Zelensky, and after the talks, Blinken dropped a big hint.
We have adjusted and adapted as needs have changed, as the battlefield has changed. And I have no doubt that we'll continue to do that as this evolves.
America says it is willing to adapt. What does that mean? It's being seen as a green light for Ukraine to use Western weapons for it to launch long-range strikes inside Russia. This would push the war deep into Russian territory. It could completely shift the battlefield, with Western weapons being used against Russia. Basically, we're talking about missiles here. Ukraine has two of them ready to go. The Storm Shadow, which is an Anglo-French missile, and the American-made ATACMS missiles. Both can hit long-range targets. They can travel as far as 190 miles, which is well over 300 kilometers. With that range, multiple targets would be in Ukraine's range, like airfields, large military bases, communication stations, logistics centers, fuel depots, ammunition warehouses. Potentially, there are 250 military targets. If Ukraine decides to hit them, it could cripple the Russian military. Kyiv, for sure, believes that this could be a game changer, that long-range strikes could end the war quickly.
To defend our people, brave steps from all our partners are necessary. It's important to lift all restrictions on the use of American and British weapons against lawful targets on Russian territory. We need decisiveness also in regards to shooting down Russian missiles and drones in Ukrainian airspace. The further Ukraine can strike, the closer a just peace will be.
America has been reluctant to do this. It has been wary of long-range attacks inside Russia, but in recent weeks, the US has been under pressure, mainly from its partners in Europe. You see, Ukrainian forces are stretched. Their incursion into Russia's Kursk region was successful. But now Ukraine is facing pressure in the east. Russian forces are closing in on Pokrovsk. This is a key Ukrainian city, an important gateway to the Donbas region. So Ukraine needs some urgent help, first to defend its territory and second to protect its gains inside Russia. Western missiles can make a difference on both fronts. There is another factor at play here, Iran's support to Russia. The West says Iran is supplying missiles to Russia. These are short-range ballistic missiles. Apparently, Moscow recently received 200 of them. These are the Fath 360 missiles. Reports say Russia could use them in Ukraine, that too within weeks.
The United States has confirmed reports that Iran has transferred shipments of Fateh 360 close-range ballistic missiles to Russia, which we assess could employ them within weeks against Ukraine, leading to the deaths of even more Ukrainian civilians.
Iran has rejected these claims, but the West does not believe Iran. 4 countries have imposed fresh sanctions on Tehran: the US, the UK, France, and Germany. But to what end? Had sanctions been effective, this war would have ended a long time back. All eyes are now on the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin's next move. In the past, Putin has drawn clear red lines for the West and issued several warnings. A few weeks back, Russia's foreign minister issued a reminder as well.
This is blackmail. This is an attempt to pretend that the West wants to avoid excessive escalation, but in reality it is deceit. The West does not want to avoid escalation. The West, as they say, is asking for it.
Asking for what? A wider war in the region? With Putin, you cannot rule it out. If Ukraine launches a long-range strike inside Russia, Moscow would view this as a direct attack by the West. And Vladimir Putin may decide to respond, possibly with nuclear weapons. He's made this threat before. But now the West seems to be willing to take its chances. Consider what the CIA chief said this month. That's Bill Burns. He called Putin a bully and dismissed his nuclear threats as saber-rattling. The West and Russia are now on a direct collision course, and this could have serious consequences. Now let's look on the other side, at Russia. What is Moscow doing as the West wrings its hands? Well, Moscow is busy holding its largest naval drills since the Soviet era.
For the first time in the last 3 decades, we are conducting such large-scale exercises at sea. They will be held simultaneously in the waters of the Pacific and Arctic Oceans, the Mediterranean, Caspian, and Baltic Seas.
The drills have been dubbed Ocean 2024, and they are well underway. Take a look at this. Russia isn't shy when it comes to showing off its naval power. The Russian Defense Ministry keeps sharing footage from the drills. Here's some footage that was shared a few hours ago. It shows Russia's night drills. They tested out the Kh-35 Uran cruise missiles. They were fired from a corvette. Other warships launched Moskit anti-ship cruise missiles, lighting up the sea. And on shore, Russia was testing its Bastion coastal missile system, which fired Onyx. These are supersonic anti-ship missiles meant for coastal defense. All of this footage you're seeing was shared freely by the Russian Defense Ministry. Moscow is basically sending a message.
We see that the United States of America are trying to maintain their global military and political dominance at any cost. With their aggressive actions, the United States are seeking to achieve a tangible military advantage and thereby break the existing security architecture and balance of power in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, the United States are provoking an arms race.
Putin says that the US is provoking an arms race, and his drills seem to say that the race is on. He's not backing down. Think about the scale of the exercise. Let's pull up the map for you to look at how the drills are spread. Russia has multiple naval bases in most of the regions. It even has a base in the Mediterranean in the city of Tartus in Syria. So Putin was not bluffing. He really can hold drills in 5 seas simultaneously, maybe more. Right now, though, the biggest theater for the drills is the Pacific. That's where the bulk of the Russian naval forces are, and they aren't alone. China is also taking part in Ocean 2024. This is the first of at least 2 joint drills being held this month. After participating here, China will host its own drills called Northern Interaction 2024. These will take place in late September. So that's 2 joint drills, 2 joint Russia-China naval exercises, back to back. It's definitely a message to the West. And the US has taken note, but Washington is trying to play it cool.
These are 2 nations that don't have a long history of working well together, certainly not militarily. These are 2 nations that don't necessarily fully trust one another in the region or beyond, around the world. So we'll watch it and monitor, but there's no, there's no dramatic, imminent concern about it.
Well, he may be right. The cooperation is not exactly dramatic. Look at the numbers. Russia says the ongoing exercise involves 90,000 military personnel, over 400 ships and vessels, 125 aircraft, and over 7,500 units of weapons and equipment. These were the figures given by the Russian Navy chief. And how much is China's contribution? 3 ships, 1 vessel, and 15 aircraft. That's what the Russian Navy said. So 4 out of 400 warships are Chinese, 1%. That's really stretching the definition of joint in joint drills. The Chinese Navy is basically on an internship. The Russians have real combat experience. China does not, unless you count harassing neighboring countries. So Beijing wants its troops to learn something from the Russians. It's certainly beneficial for China. But will this help Russia in the long run? Maybe not militarily, but it will help them diplomatically. It helps Moscow send a powerful message to the West. It shows them that Russia is not alone and that Western efforts to isolate it have failed. Durga Puja season is almost upon us. It's a major festival on the Hindu calendar, especially in Bengali culture. You can see major celebrations in West Bengal and Bangladesh. Though in Bangladesh, there's a rider. You may have to celebrate in silence. That's right, Dhaka's interim regime has issued an order. Hindus must pause puja activities during Muslim prayers. As you know, Muslims pray 5 times a day. The call to prayer is called azan. The prayer itself is called namaz. Now, Dhaka says puja activities must be paused 5 minutes before azan and also during the namaz. And this includes most puja activities like musical instruments or religious chants or the regular arti, which is a sort of a light offering to the god. This decision was announced by the interim Home Minister. He says all puja committees have agreed to this. Plans are also in place to provide round-the-clock security at puja sites. And you can see why. Bangladesh's Hindus have been targeted since Sheikh Hasina's ouster. More than 200 attacks have been reported so far, so puja sites could be prime targets. But was this hush order really necessary? Well, it's not unprecedented. Sheikh Hasina did the same thing last year. She asked Hindus to pause puja activities during Muslim prayers. So the order itself is not news or new. But it does reveal something about Bangladesh's society, about their secularism. It's not the sort of secularism that we see here in India or even in Western countries. It's a contradictory model. Let me explain. This is what Article 8 of Bangladesh's constitution says, that the country is secular. Now look at Article 2A. It says, Islam is the state religion of Bangladesh. Do you see the problem here? Bangladesh is a secular country with a state religion, which is why you see orders like this one. Dhaka may tolerate other religions, but Islam always comes first, and frankly, it's a slippery slope. Islamists have been trying to exploit this contradiction in Bangladesh's secularism, especially the Jamaat-e-Islami. Their goal is to create an Islamist Bangladesh ruled through Sharia. Sheikh Hasina kept such forces at bay, but can Muhammad Yunus do the same? Is he even interested in doing this? Yunus addressed the nation on Wednesday. He called for communal harmony and unity. He also said no one should take the law into their hands.
We are a country of communal harmony. None of you must do anything in any way which can affect religious harmony. No one should take the law into their own hands. If anyone creates disorder in society by doing so, we will definitely bring them under punishment.
Yunus also announced 6 committees. They will carry out reforms in different sectors: electoral system, police administration, judiciary, anti-corruption drive, public administration and constitution. But where is the committee on religious harmony or on secularism? It's like the interim government is downplaying this issue. Consider what Muhammad Yunus said last week. He said the attacks on Hindus were exaggerated. He said they were political, not religious. Maybe the claims of genocide were exaggerated, but many Hindus did face attacks in Bangladesh. Their houses were vandalized and their businesses were looted. Where is the justice for them? You filed nearly 100 cases against Sheikh Hasina. You're willing to jeopardize ties with India by demanding her extradition, but you can't nab Islamist rioters. It clearly shows what the priority is. So I'm afraid big claims on communal harmony will not do. Yunus and his regime must walk the talk. The upcoming Durga Puja is a good chance for them. Some 32,000 puja sites will be set up across the country. Let's see how the festival unfolds, how safe it is, how vibrant it is, and how inclusive it is. The early signs are clearly not good, but let's see what October brings.
Whether he, as a Sikh, is going to be allowed to wear his turban in India.
With great power comes great responsibility. Someone should tell that to Rahul Gandhi. He's not just an MP anymore, he's the leader of the opposition, that too in the world's largest democracy. So what he says is consequential. But looks like he's forgotten that. Rahul Gandhi toured the United States this week. He addressed the Indian diaspora, he spoke to journalists, he attended community events, and during one such event, he made a controversial statement. Rahul Gandhi suggested that Sikhs face discrimination in India. that they are fighting to uphold their culture. Listen to this.
The fight is about whether he, as a Sikh, is going to be allowed to wear his turban in India. Or he, as a Sikh, is going to be allowed to wear a kada in India. Or he, as a Sikh, is going to be able to go to a Gurdwara. That's what the fight is about.
If you live in India, you know this is not true. Sikhs across the country wear a turban. They also wear the kada or the religious bangle. No one stops them from going to a Gurudwara. In fact, there are Sikh temples or Gurudwaras across major Indian cities. Then where is the discrimination? Where is the fight? The fact is, there is none. Which is why Sikh groups organized a protest outside his residence.
Rahul Gandhi! Rahul Gandhi! Rahul Gandhi!
But the damage is done. Khalistani groups have latched on to Rahul Gandhi's words. Look at this statement by the SFJ, the Sikhs for Justice, SFJ. It is a Khalistani outfit banned by the government of India. Let me quote their statement. Rahul's statement corroborates SFJ's stance on the justification for Punjab independence referendum to establish Sikh homeland Khalistan. So Khalistanis are quoting Rahul Gandhi now. They're using his words to justify separatism. I'm sure Rahul Gandhi will reject such claims. He'll probably say he meant something else. But I'm afraid that's not enough. Such mistakes have strategic consequences. Just look at the name below the SFJ statement, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, a man designated as a terrorist by India, a man at the center of a delicate diplomatic issue. Washington says India's spy agency tried to assassinate Pannu. They've also arrested an Indian national in this case, but India has rejected this allegation. At the same time, it is building its own case, a case against Khalistanis abroad. New Delhi is convincing or trying to convince the world that Khalistan is not some popular movement, that Sikhs are not under threat in India. And what does Rahul Gandhi do? Rant about Sikhs not being able to wear a turban or enter a Gurdwara or wear the kada. You see why this is a problem? Such statements undermine India's campaign. The US can now easily point to Rahul Gandhi's statements. They can say, look, your own opposition leader is saying Sikhs are not safe. So why should we believe you? And it's not an isolated incident. While in the United States, Rahul Gandhi met a group of lawmakers. Among them was Ilhan Omar. She has pushed anti-India regulations in the US Congress, like condemning so-called rights violations in India or designating India as a country of concern for religious freedoms. In fact, in 2022, she visited Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. She talked about rights violations on the other side in Jammu and Kashmir. The simple question is, why do all this? You could have met any US lawmaker in Washington. Why the anti-India one? All of this has been counterproductive for Rahul Gandhi. His US trip was about turning a new leaf. He's just led his party to a good performance in the general election. He's been chosen as leader of the opposition, so Rahul Gandhi has been riding high. In the US, he wanted to show this new version of himself, a confident and more popular one. But clearly it's backfired. You can criticize the government here or abroad. You can offer your own version or vision. But you cannot give ammunition to anti-India elements. Surely that's a fair expectation. Now let's talk about women's safety. It's an issue that we've been raising for some time now, and the reason is very simple. Women are not safe anywhere. Not on the streets, and definitely not in their homes. Take this case, for example. A Swiss model was murdered in her home. The killer was her husband. But here's the gory part. After killing her, he chopped up her body parts, pureed some of them in a blender, and dissolved them in a chemical solution. Just the thought of it would make anyone shudder. Yet this is not an isolated incident. Every 11 minutes, a woman or a girl is killed by someone in her family. Every 11 minutes. Our next report tells you more.
This is Kristina Joksimovic, a model, a former Miss Switzerland finalist, a mother of two. In February, she was found killed in her home. She was only 38. But it wasn't just any other murder. Christina was killed by her husband. Now the 41-year-old admitted to the murder. But at first, he called it an act of self-defense. He said that she attacked him with a knife. He tried to protect himself, and that's how he killed her. But further investigation suggested otherwise. There was no evidence of any attack or any struggle. The probe found that Christina was strangulated. Her husband strangled her. But what he did after that was even more shocking. He dismembered her body. It was done with a jigsaw power model, a knife and garden shears. He then took those chopped body parts and put them in a blender. Those were then pureed, and he ended up dissolving them in a chemical solution. It was to get rid of all the evidence. He didn't succeed in his attempt, but the act itself was so monstrous, it's shaken the world. So what explains this brutality? The husband is currently in police custody. He hasn't given any reason for the murder, but prosecutors say he showed a lack of empathy, a sort of cold-bloodedness often seen only in serial killers. Also, this isn't the first such incident. Investigators say he has strangled her before. Apparently, he once grabbed Christina by her neck, banging her head against the wall. Now, this may be one of those murders that send shivers down your spine, but it isn't an isolated incident. Every day, somewhere in the world, a woman is murdered, either by her partner, or by a stranger, or by a system that fails to protect her. It's called femicide, the murder of a woman simply because of her gender. In 2022, 89,000 women and girls were killed worldwide intentionally. Basically, a minor or girl is killed by someone in her own family every 11 minutes. 55% of those murders were by their partners or family members. 40% of femicide victims remain unaccounted for. For many women, the most dangerous place is not on the streets, it's within their own homes. Like Christina, thousands die at the hands of their husbands, boyfriends or partners. What begins as love often spirals into fear, control and violence. So where does it end? Well, it can only change with stricter laws. We need stronger protections for women, harsher penalties for offenders, and most of all, we need to recognize that this is not a private problem, it's a societal problem. Women are not safe anywhere, and the onus of her safety, contrary to popular belief, lies not on her, but on the society that enables her perpetrators.
Can the most populous country in the world provide free health care for all? With over 1.4 billion people, it sounds like an impossible task, yet India is giving it a shot. Yesterday, the government made an announcement. It will offer a free health insurance cover. It will cover all Indians above the age of 70. Now, this is not a new scheme. The government is basically expanding the scope of an existing one. The scheme is called Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman means having a long life. This scheme, Ayushman Bharat, was launched in 2018. Back then, it was aimed at lower income groups, around 100 million poor and vulnerable families. This is the bottom 40% of India. They were given a health cover of 5 lakh rupees. That's almost $6,000. It was completely free. The premiums were paid by the central and state governments. Now, the same health cover will be extended to senior citizens, irrespective of their income or their social standing. As long as you're 70 years and above and a citizen of India, you can avail this insurance for free. The government says this will benefit 60 million citizens of India. This scheme checks most of the boxes. It covers all citizens without any preconditions. Even pre-existing diseases are covered. Now, seniors above 70 are a vulnerable lot. Many of them suffer from ailments. The health cover will be offered to them without any preconditions. Even if you have a health insurance policy, you qualify for the Ayushman Bharat. It won't affect your existing policy in any way. And where can this health cover be used? Ayushman Bharat has a network of nearly 30,000 hospitals. Over 12,000 of them are private hospitals. For senior citizens without a health cover, this is a big relief. They face the highest risk of a medical emergency. And 98% of senior citizens in India do not have a health cover, 98%. If they fall sick, they risk losing their entire life savings. So this initiative should certainly be welcomed. But India is still a long way off from universal health care. 72 out of 195 countries in the world have some form of universal coverage, so universal health coverage. 72 countries. Broadly, two models exist. In countries like the UK, healthcare costs are entirely covered by the government. In other cases, they fund healthcare through private and public contributions, like in Germany, where both the employer and the employees contribute to a fund, and that fund pays for healthcare for all. Private insurance is available for those who want it, but all Germans get the same level of treatment. In comparison, Ayushman Bharat has its limits. There is a cap of 5 lakh rupees, which may not be enough for those above 70 years of age. What's worse, if two members in one family are over 70, this 5 lakh cover will be split between them. This is what insurers call a family floater. Also, the quality of care could differ from one hospital to another. There have been complaints over implementation as well. Earlier this year, some private hospitals raised concerns. They reported delays in receiving payments. State governments were blamed for this. They weren't allocating enough funds for this health insurance scheme. This caused issues for the hospitals, but it was the intended beneficiaries who really suffered because hospitals ended up reducing the services they offered under Ayushman Bharat. The government has been trying to find solutions to these problems, like setting up a health insurance regulator, a watchdog for the entire sector, one that regulates both private and government insurance schemes. The sector could certainly use one. Today, over 40 crore Indians do not have a health cover, and 68% of those who do have one, who have a health insurance, do not have adequate coverage, 68%. The cost is a major hurdle for most of these people. What's worse, health insurance premiums are taxed. There's an 18% GST or goods and services tax. The government is rethinking these taxes, and that would help. So in conclusion, let me say this. Ayushman Bharat is the beginning of a reset of India's healthcare. It's a step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. Swiss chocolate, Italian fashion, French wine and German cars. This is how Europe marketed its products. With cars, you had to agree. Europeans had the best automotive technology, especially the Germans. But now the European car industry is facing decline. Look at the shares of top car makers. Volkswagen is more than 20% down this year. BMW is nearly 30% down. Porsche is 16% down. Mercedes-Benz is 11% down. And Stellantis is 36% down. These companies once dominated the car market. So what happened to them? Just look at BMW. They have cut their profit forecast for this year from 10 to 7%. As a result, their shares plunged more than 11% on Tuesday, the biggest single-day drop since the pandemic. So clearly something is wrong. Experts talk about two main reasons. Number one, the fall in demand, and number two, the failed electric vehicle bet. Let's look at both these factors. 4 countries make up a big chunk of car sales in Europe: France, Spain, Italy, Germany. Last month, sales dropped 16% in these countries, 16% less sales compared to last year. And why is that? Well, the economic outlook is not encouraging. Germany had a technical recession last year in 2023. Interest rates are still high, and inflation remains a sticky problem. So buying a car is too much of a risk at this point. And this trend goes beyond Europe. Even in India, car sales are down. Indian dealers have 780,000 unsold vehicles in stock. So the problem is global, which brings us to the second reason. The EV bet has not worked. You see, EV or electric vehicles cost more than combustion engines. The running cost is less, but the initial buying cost is way more. So customers will look for the best deal. Enter Chinese EV makers. A BYD car, BYD is a Chinese company, a BYD car costs less than 38,000 euros. A Volkswagen EV costs about 46,000 euros, and the BYD comes with more features and trendy looks. So which one would you buy? Obviously the Chinese one. Thus, European car makers are losing out in the EV market. Stellantis made up 4% of EV sales in 2022. They're down to 2.7%. Volkswagen Group was at 7.5% in 2023. They're now down to a little over 6.5%. Mercedes has fallen from 2.5% to 1.9%. As a result, some of these companies are cutting costs. Like Volkswagen. They're thinking about closing a factory in Germany. Imagine that, a Volkswagen factory shutting down in Germany. The question is, can they reverse their fortunes? Well, Europe is doing two things. One, they're delaying their EV goals. A lot of European car makers promised to phase out combustion engines by 2030, but now they're saying that's not possible. Volvo, Volkswagen, Mercedes, all of them are delaying their target, meaning they will keep selling more combustion engine cars and hybrids. That's the first thing. Secondly, they're rethinking their China strategy. The European Union had planned to impose tariffs on Chinese EVs, but European car makers are not thrilled. Why? Because China may respond with a tit for tat. Beijing can easily slap tariffs on European cars, which will hurt the likes of Volkswagen. European brands make up 20% of China's auto market, so they're keen to protect it. We saw similar statements and sentiments from the Spanish government. First, they supported the tariffs. Now they say, let's rethink. But tariffs or no tariffs, European car makers face a bigger challenge, the challenge of being outdated. The same thing happened to American car makers. They once dominated the auto market, but today America's car belt is a ghost region. They simply couldn't keep up with the new trends and innovations. Europe is now facing the same problem. Yes, their cars are known as status symbols, and yes, the quality is still top-notch, but they're not futuristic, not like a Tesla or a BYD. So European car makers need an ideological revamp. If not, the era of their dominance could be ending. Now let's look at Asia, Central Asia, where a major project is finally underway, the Tapi pipeline. The pipeline will transport natural gas through 4 nations, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. That's why it's TAPI or Tapi pipeline. It was first proposed back in 1995. Construction began only in 2015, but the work has constantly been delayed because of the instability in Afghanistan. But now, Afghanistan is firmly under Taliban control and they want to build the pipeline. So yesterday, the Taliban began the construction work amid great fanfare. So what is this controversial pipeline? How will it benefit the 4 countries it passes through? And can it really be built through the hostile neighborhood? Our next report has the details.
May God grant them and our officials the success by which this project and this convoy that has reached this stage should reach their final destination.
That was Hassan Akhund, senior Taliban leader and the acting Prime Minister of Afghanistan. He was in Turkmenistan yesterday, at a town near the Afghanistan-Turkmenistan border. He was there to attend a ceremony to mark the beginning of work on the Tapi pipeline. The pipeline will transport natural gas from Turkmenistan's Galkanish gas field. It will take that gas to Afghanistan's western city of Herat and then on to Kandahar. After that, the pipeline will cross into Pakistan. It will pass through Quetta and then Multan before entering India. The pipeline will terminate in the Indian city of Fazilka in Punjab. So you can see this pipeline will connect 4 countries: Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. It's an ambitious project. The pipeline will stretch across 1,800 kilometers. It's expected to cost around $10 billion. and take about a decade to complete. But after years of delays, the ball is finally rolling. Turkmenistan began construction a while ago, back in 2015. Afghanistan was supposed to start work in 2018, but it wasn't possible back then, due to attacks by the Taliban. But now, the very same Taliban are in power. They want the pipeline built. That's why work on the Afghan side finally began yesterday. The Taliban declared a holiday in the Herat province to celebrate the project's commencement. The Taliban feel that the pipeline will help their battered economy. They say it will create 12,000 jobs for the Afghan people and lead to continuous income over time. The pipeline is eventually expected to transport 33 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. It will transport the gas from Turkmenistan all the way to India. Both India and Pakistan will buy 42% of that gas. Afghanistan will import the remaining 16%. The Taliban also hope to make $500 million annually in transit fees. So the pipeline will be a boon for the Taliban. But what about the other nations involved? Turkmenistan gets new markets. Pakistan and India will get a new source of natural gas. India is a net importer of natural gas. Almost half of the natural gas India uses is imported. The Tapi pipeline will be able to supply almost 14 billion cubic meters of natural gas to India. This will help with energy security and may bring down energy prices. But the pipeline won't be operational for years, if at all. The pipeline isn't fully funded yet, so the Taliban will have to secure money to build it. Then there are the next stages, between Afghanistan and Pakistan and India. The problem in both cases is Islamabad. India and Pakistan don't get along. That's obvious. There's bad blood between Kabul and Islamabad as well. And this could prevent the next stage of the pipeline from being built. So there's a long way to go before the Tapi pipeline is fully functional, making these celebrations by the Taliban a bit premature.
Our next story is about the so-called Commonwealth of Nations. For those of you who don't know, the Commonwealth is an international association made up of the UK and former British colonies. It's a strange little club whose prime function is a mystery. We don't have free trade agreements. We don't have visa-free travel to the UK. As far as anyone can tell, the only purpose is nostalgia. Maybe it's to remind Charles of the good old days when his family subjugated over 20% of the world's population. But now even those memories are proving uncomfortable for Britain. Every 8 years, the Commonwealth elects a new Secretary General. The next one will be chosen in October, and this time the 3 candidates are from Africa, from Gambia, Ghana and Lesotho. All 3 candidates could become a problem for Britain because they all support reparations. Reparations mean compensation for past wrongs. It's a way of making amends, usually in the form of cash. All 3 Commonwealth Secretary General candidates believe the UK owes reparations for slavery and for colonialism. Now, India is a former British colony. We won our independence from the British in 1947, so the reparation issue could affect us too. The issue is certainly interesting. On the one hand, India should definitely be compensated for colonization. Before the British came along, India was one of the richest regions in the world. This is said often enough, but let me add some context. The English word loot has its origins in India. The English were doing it so often, they literally stole the word as well. The English word mogul, as in media mogul or oil mogul, also comes from India. It's how the English pronounced Mughal. India was so rich that the British used the dynasty's name as a synonym for an enormously wealthy individual. It shows that the British knew what they were doing. They literally came to India to pillage resources from the wealthy. And after about 200 years, they left the subcontinent a shell of its former self. So India definitely has a claim to reparations. But now let's look at the other argument. Should we really be raising this claim at the Commonwealth? The institution's name itself is a mockery. The British ended up taking wealth from all the other members. That's the only thing we have in common. And like its name, the institution itself is a joke, with no clear purpose other than maybe an international English speakers club. So why should we raise important issues in such a decrepit forum? Issues like reparations. There's no chance the Commonwealth will move the needle, no matter how persuasive the new Secretary General might be. The group just doesn't have the mandate to pull it off, or anything else for that matter. Which brings me to the next point. Why are we still members of such a pointless institution? It may have made sense in the last century, when Britain was still an economic force, but now the country is on its last legs. It is steadily losing its clout, its economy is on the ventilator, the population seems to detest anyone who wants to migrate there, even people they once colonized. So then, what is the point of sticking around in the Commonwealth? It's a question that India should think hard about. Perhaps it's time to shed the old colonial ties and chart a separate path. Perhaps it's time to abandon the sinking ship that is Britain. New Delhi hasn't tried to do so yet. Maybe because of pity or just for a laugh, but until India decides to quit the Commonwealth, it should throw its weight behind the next Secretary General, not just for the money, but also to see Charles and the gang squirm as they try and get out of it. Our last story is about a space mission, and it's not just another mission. It's a mission that has made history. Today, a private crew took part in a spacewalk some 700 kilometers from planet Earth. They were not astronauts. They were, in fact, a billionaire, his childhood best friend, and 2 engineers. And this was the first private spacewalk ever. The mission was funded by fintech billionaire Jared Isaacman. It used SpaceX rockets and equipment, and it has opened a new avenue for private space travel. But can anyone just buy a ticket to space? And why are governments allowing this? Our next report tells you.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
With those words, Jared Isaacman made history. It was a risky venture, but the billionaire pulled it off. He and his private crew stepped out of their spacecraft, did a spacewalk, and returned back to safety nearly 700 kilometers away from planet Earth. This makes them the first civilians to conduct a spacewalk. The mission is called Polaris Dawn. 2 days ago, Jared Isaacman took off in a SpaceX rocket.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
He's a fintech billionaire with a net worth of around $1.9 billion. He's also bankrolling this mission. So he's on board as commander. Joining him are 3 people. His close friend Scott Poteet and SpaceX engineers Anna Menon and Sarah Gillis. The goal was a private spacewalk above the planet. But there's a catch. No human has been this far since NASA's Apollo program in the 1970s. Also, these are amateur astronauts. They had no prior training or any such experience. So them pulling this off is a miracle. Only 2 of them conducted the spacewalk. They didn't float away or use jetpacks to fly away untethered. They just spent a few minutes each out in open space. But that doesn't make this any less iconic. In fact, it's a new horizon for private space travel. Space was once the frontier of nations. Now it's becoming more and more commercial. It started in the 2000s when a group of rich individuals spent a fortnight at the International Space Station. But that era of space tourism ended by 2009. And now there's a revival once again. More and more private companies are chasing the cosmos. And one major player is Elon Musk's SpaceX. It was founded in 2002. Initially, the company was dismissed by traditionalists. But right now, it's a powerhouse. SpaceX launches more rockets than any other competitor. And most of those missions are a success. Elon Musk says his dream is to make humans a multi-planet species. Which brings us to private space travel. This seems to be the year for it. Earlier this summer, Two billionaires went to space, Jeff Bezos and Sir Richard Branson. They both had their private vehicles. And now there's the Polaris Dawn. And later this year, there will be more visits to the ISS. So a lot of missions are coming up, and there's a reason for it. You see, space travel is exorbitantly expensive. So for governments, this solves a problem. Individuals are funding their own space travel. They are pushing the boundaries of space exploration. And nations don't have to spend a dime on it. But it still doesn't mean anyone can just buy a ticket and get on a rocket. Space travel is more accessible, yes, but don't be mistaken. It's still very much a billionaire's playground. That said, this space mission is historic. It was a short walk for Jared Isaacman in space. But for private space travel, it's a big leap.
Do you know who's the most photographed person on Earth? Queen Elizabeth II. Nearly anyone can recognize her in a blink. Except maybe the artist of this statue. It was unveiled last week in Northern Ireland. It shows the late Queen, her husband, the late Prince Philip, and her two corgis. Well, in theory, it was meant to be a tribute, but in reality, it looks like a bronze mishap. As if Mrs. Doubtfire got a pair of boots. And it's not like the artist got just her likeness wrong. Even the dogs don't look much like corgis. Now, we all know that art is subjective, but this isn't the first time a statue has borne little resemblance to the real-life figure. So do these artists get the wrong reference picture, or is creative misrepresentation just cool? Either way, let's give credit where it is due. The artist captured something. We're just not sure it's Queen Elizabeth II or her beloved pets.
It wasn't through all the press hype the last few days, I don't think you'd have walked past that statue not realising it was Queen Elizabeth.
It's not how I thought the Queen should look. I don't even think it looks like her face.
It just doesn't look right. Even Prince Philip, it doesn't portray them right.
Close because this lady looks like an old lady at the market to buy some potatoes or something like that.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The Harris campaign may have got Taylor Swift, but looks like the Trump campaign has one-upped them as Joe Biden dons a Trump campaign hat in New York. Protesters clash with police after the Argentine Congress blocks a pension hike, and British Formula One star Lando Norris drives a McLaren made out of Lego. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1959, the Soviet Union launched the Luna 2 spacecraft. It became the first vehicle to reach the moon's surface and the first to touch another celestial body. Unlike today's spacecraft, Luna did not have a smooth landing. In fact, it simply crashed into the moon's surface. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
I need that hat.
Want my autograph?
Hell no.
You know my name. Come on.
I ain't going that far.
Yeah, you said you would do a selfie. There you go.